Man, I cannot believe what I just watched on First Take this morning. The Golden State Warriors segment was absolutely wild, and Stephen A. Smith, along with the rest of the crew, went completely off about everything happening with this franchise right now. If you're a Warriors fan and you haven't been paying attention to the chaos surrounding this team, let me tell you, things are getting crazy. The Jimmy Butler injury, the Jonathan Kuminga drama, the losing, all of it was discussed in detail. But here's what really caught my attention and had me on the edge of my seat. The First Take analysts spent a significant amount of time discussing a potential trade target that could completely change the trajectory of this Warriors season. That name is Zach LaVine, and the analysis they did on why this move could actually make sense for Golden State was absolutely fascinating. Let me break down everything that went down on the show, because there's so much to unpack here. First Take opened the Warriors segment by addressing the elephant in the room. This team is in crisis mode right now. The Jimmy Butler injury that ended his season has left a massive hole in the roster. Jonathan Kuminga, who was supposed to step up with an expanded role, just got hurt again in the game against the Mavericks. The team lost to a Dallas squad that was missing most of their key players. Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back at all, saying that the Warriors are in serious trouble and need to make aggressive moves before the trade deadline if they want to salvage anything from this season. Hey, what's up, everyone? Real quick before we get into everything, that like button is literally what determines if this reaches hundreds or thousands of fans. Takes 1 second, but makes a huge impact on the channel's growth. Just smash that like button right now. It's the easiest thing you can do, but honestly, the biggest way to support this content. Every single like pushes this further, so hit it now. The analysts talked extensively about the Jonathan Kuminga situation because it's become such a disaster for the Warriors. They mentioned how Kuminga was fouled driving to the basket and ended up falling awkwardly on the leg of Mavericks guard Brandon Williams. He tried to play through it, made both free throws, but eventually had to limp to the locker room with trainers. It was initially ruled an ankle injury, but reports came out that it's also a knee issue. The First Take crew pointed out that while the injury isn't believed to be serious, the timing couldn't be worse with the trade deadline less than 2 weeks away. Stephen A. Smith made a passionate point about the pattern with Kuminga's injury. He went through the history. In his rookie year, 3 weeks missed with a knee injury. In 2023, 3 weeks with a foot injury. In 2024, about a week and a half with a knee injury. Then last year, 2 months with an ankle sprain from January to March. And now, this season, he already missed 2 weeks in November with a knee injury, and now this new one. For a player who relies so heavily on athleticism, on his bounce, on his ability to attack the rim, this injury history is extremely concerning. The analysts discussed how this affects Kuminga's trade value, which was already at rock bottom. They talked about how he was getting DNPs from Steve Kerr for a month, how the relationship between player and organization has been described as fractured beyond repair, and how Kuminga has zero desire to stay on the team according to multiple reports. But here's the problem. Who wants to trade for a guy who was benched for a month and now has back-to-back seasons with lower leg injuries? The market for Kuminga is essentially non-existent. That's when the First Take discussion pivoted to what the Warriors should actually do, and Zach LaVine's name came up as a potential target that could make sense for Golden State. Now, I know what you're thinking. LaVine? Really? But hear me out, because the analysts made some compelling points about why this might actually work. Stephen A. Smith laid out the case for LaVine to the Warriors, and it was surprisingly logical. He started by talking about the Warriors' desperate need for scoring punch alongside Stephen Curry. With Jimmy Butler out for the season and Kuminga likely on his way out via trade or just not playing due to his injuries and animosity toward the organization, the Warriors need someone who can put the ball in the basket. LaVine is exactly that type of player. One of the analysts went deep into LaVine's offensive profile. He talked about how LaVine is an explosive 3-level scorer who can create his own shot off the dribble, pull up from 3, attack the rim with elite athleticism, and knock down catch-and-shoot opportunities. For a Warriors offense that's been struggling to generate points without Curry carrying the entire load. Adding someone with LaVine's scoring ability would be transformative. The fit in Steve Kerr's system was discussed extensively. The analysts pointed out that LaVine can play both with and without the ball, which is crucial in the Warriors' motion offense. He's not a guy who needs to dominate the ball to be effective. He can run off screens, catch and shoot, and also create when needed. His three-point shooting percentage has been consistently high throughout his career, which fits perfectly with the Warriors' emphasis on spacing and ball movement. Stephen A. Smith made an interesting point about how the Warriors' front office has viewed LaVine in the past. He mentioned that while there have been previous discussions about LaVine when he was getting shopped from Chicago, the Warriors balked at the trade talks. But the circumstances are different now. With Jimmy Butler out, with Kuminga being a disaster, with the window closing on Curry's prime years, maybe it's time for the Warriors to reconsider. The defensive concerns with LaVine were addressed because you can't have an honest conversation about him without acknowledging that he's never been known as an elite defender. But the First Take analysts argued that the Warriors have historically been able to hide weaker defenders in their system. With Draymond Green still anchoring the defense, with the schemes and rotations that Kerr employs, LaVine's defensive limitations might not be as damaging as they would be on other teams. The offensive upside is so significant that it could be worth the defensive trade-off. One analyst brought up an interesting perspective from inside the Warriors organization. He mentioned that some within Golden State have actually considered LaVine as a safer long-term option compared to other trade targets they've pursued. At 29 years old, LaVine is in his prime. His contract, while large, is actually slightly cheaper than Jimmy Butler's was and has more years on it, giving the Warriors more control. And unlike Butler, who had his own drama and ultimately got injured, LaVine represents a more stable, predictable option. The age factor and maximizing Curry's remaining prime years was a major topic of discussion. Stephen A. Smith was particularly passionate about this point. He talked about how Curry is 36 years old, how he doesn't have many years left at this elite level, and how the Warriors owe it to him to put the best possible team around him. Standing pat and hoping things get better isn't a strategy. You have to be aggressive. You have to take calculated risks, and LaVine represents that type of move. The First Take crew also discussed other names that have been floated as potential Warriors target, and they compared those options to LaVine. DeMar DeRozan was mentioned, but the analysts questioned whether he would really fit better than LaVine, given that his playstyle is similar to Kuminga's in some ways, and the Warriors already don't like that style. Andrew Wiggins was discussed as a potential swap for Kuminga with the Heat, essentially bringing him back to the Bay Area, but that move doesn't really elevate the team's ceiling. Michael Porter Jr. was mentioned as well, and the analysts acknowledged that he would fit seamlessly into the Warriors system from a basketball standpoint. But there were questions raised about whether his personality would mesh with Curry and Draymond Green in the locker room. The First Take crew joked about some of Porter's podcast takes and whether those conversations would go over well in the Warriors' culture. The Jonathan Kuminga injury and trade situation was tied back into the LaVine discussion because whatever happens with Kuminga affects what the Warriors can do elsewhere. The analysts talked about how Kuminga was finally starting to show out in the expanded role after Butler's injury. He had 20 points against the Raptors, 10 points on perfect shooting against the Mavericks before getting hurt. He was starting to prove that he could be valuable, and then this injury happened. It's like the Warriors can't escape the bad luck with this kid. The First Take panel discussed what Kuminga's mindset probably is right now. Chris Haynes reported that Kuminga has zero desire to stay on the team. Anthony Slater mentioned that his animosity toward the organization remains, and he wants to be traded elsewhere. But the question is, who's going to trade for him now? With another injury on his resume, with the history of leg problems, with the reported attitude issues, his trade value is basically at zero. One analyst made a sobering point about the Warriors' overall situation. He said that this season is essentially a wash at this point. With Butler out, with Kuminga injured and disgruntled, with the roster construction being what it is, The Warriors aren't contending for a championship this year. The loss to a depleted Mavericks team, losing to guys like Najee Marshall and Brandon Williams, that tells you everything you need to know about where this team is right now. But the analyst also pushed back against the notion that the Warriors should just do nothing, tank the rest of the season. He argued that they still need to make moves, both for the present and for the future. Acquiring someone like LaVine would at least give them something to build around alongside Curry. It would show that the organization is still trying to compete. It would give the fans something to be excited about. Stephen A. Smith agreed with this assessment. He said that the Warriors have made too many mistakes over the past few years, from letting key players walk to making questionable roster decisions. The Jimmy Butler acquisition was supposed to be the move that put them back in contention, and now that's gone. They need to pivot quickly and find alternative solutions, and LaVine represents one of those alternatives. The contract implications of a LaVine trade were discussed as well. His salary is significant, and making the numbers work would require the Warriors to get creative with their trade packages. But the analysts pointed out that the Warriors have expiring contracts, they have young players they could include, and they have the motivation to make something happen. The front office needs to be aggressive and find a way to make it work. One really interesting point that came up was about the Warriors' championship DNA. Stephen A. Smith talked about how this is a franchise that knows how to win. They've won 4 championships in the past decade. They have Curry, one of the greatest players ever. They have Draymond, one of the greatest defenders ever. But all that history and experience means nothing if you don't have the roster to compete. Adding LaVine would give them a legitimate second scoring option and put them back in the conversation as a playoff contender at minimum. The First Take panel ended with predictions on whether the Warriors will actually pursue LaVine aggressively. The consensus was that they should, even if there was some skepticism about whether they will. The basketball fit is there. The need is obvious. The trade deadline is approaching. All the pieces are in place for something to happen. Stephen A. Smith's closing argument was passionate, and I think it resonated with Warriors fans everywhere. He said that you can't just accept mediocrity when you have Stephen Curry on your roster. You owe it to him, you owe it to the fans, you owe it to the franchise's legacy to do everything possible to compete. Zach LaVine isn't a perfect player, but he's an all-star caliber scorer who could transform the Warriors' offense. Sometimes you have to take imperfect options, because perfect options don't exist. So there you have it, folks. That's everything First Take covered about the potential arrival of Zach LaVine to the Golden State Warriors, the Kuminga injury and drama, the desperate need for scoring, the fit in Kerr's system, the age considerations, the contract implications, all of it. It's a complicated situation with a lot of moving parts, but LaVine represents a realistic option that could give the Warriors new life. I'm going to be keeping my eyes on all the trade deadline news and updates, and I'll make sure to bring you the latest information as soon as anything breaks. If you enjoyed this breakdown, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. Drop a comment below letting me know what you think. Would you want Zach LaVine on the Warriors? Is he worth the contract concerns? Can he coexist with Curry and help save this season? I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.